Welcome to Agatha Christie Tales. Tonight, we venture into the glittering heart of London's high society, where sapphires gleam like frozen tears, and secrets lurk behind every polished smile. It is 1936, and Hercule Poirot finds himself summoned to Mayfair, not by Scotland Yard, but by a desperate woman whose husband stands accused of theft and murder. The Dorington Sapphires, worth a king's ransom, have vanished. A man lies dead. And the evidence points to one of London's most respected financiers. Join us for the Sapphire Conspiracy, a tale of greed, devotion, and betrayal, crafted in homage to the masterful Agatha Christie, whose genius we honour, though this mystery unfolds on our own terms. Before we begin, tell us in the comments, where are you joining us from tonight? Your presence illuminates our journey through these shadowed mysteries. Now, let the story unfold. Chapter 1. The summons, the Morning Post had brought nothing of particular interest to our Whitehaven Mansions flat. A circular from a tailor, 2 invitations to functions Poirot would certainly decline, and a letter from my Aunt Agatha, inquiring after my health with her customary persistence. I was therefore surprised when, at precisely 11 o'clock, Mrs. Pearson announced a visitor. "A Lady Ashworth, sir," she said, her eyebrows communicating that particular elevation reserved for the aristocracy. "She's in quite a state, if I may say so." Poirot, who had been arranging a small collection of porcelain eggs on the mantelpiece with geometric precision, turned with interest. "Lady Ashworth, the wife of Sir Reginald Ashworth, the financier. I couldn't say, sir, but she's wearing pearls at 11 in the morning, so I'd wager she's someone." I suppressed a smile. Mrs. Pearson's social observations, while unorthodox, were rarely inaccurate. "Show her in, if you please," said Poirot, adjusting the position of a final egg by precisely 2 millimeters. The woman who entered our sitting room was perhaps 45, handsome rather than beautiful, with the kind of bone structure that photographs well and ages gracefully. Her grey silk dress whispered of Paris, and the pearls Mrs. Pearson had noted were indeed magnificent, a triple strand that caught the pale November light. Yet beneath this armour of elegance, Lady Ashworth was trembling. "Monsieur Poirot." Her voice was carefully controlled, each syllable a small victory over emotion. "Thank you for seeing me without appointment. She faltered, "I am in desperate need of your assistance." Poirot gestured toward the chair nearest the fire. "Please, Lady Ashworth, sit. My friend Captain Hastings will provide you with coffee, and you will tell me everything." I busied myself with the coffee service, Poirot's preferred blend from Fortnum's, while our visitor composed herself. By the time I pressed a cup into her gloved hands, she had found her voice again. "You will have read the newspapers, Monsieur Poirot, the Dorington Sapphires." I had indeed. The theft had dominated the front pages for 3 days. The Dorington Sapphires, a matched set of 7 Kashmir stones, deep cornflower blue, once belonging to an Indian Maharaja, had been stolen from the private collection of Marcus Whitfield, London's most prestigious gem dealer. Whitfield himself had been found dead in his study, struck down beside his empty safe. "I have read the accounts with great interest," Poirot acknowledged. "The police believe the theft and murder are connected. A crime of opportunity, perhaps, or a planned robbery that became violent. The police believe my husband committed both crimes." Lady Ashworth's cup rattled against its saucer. "Reginald's fingerprints were found on Mr. Whitfield's safe. His monogrammed cigarette case was discovered beneath the desk. And her voice broke. He cannot account for his whereabouts between 9 and 11 o'clock on the night in question. Poirot's eyes, which had been half-lidded with apparent drowsiness, sharpened. Sir Reginald has been arrested? Not yet, but Inspector Jameson made it abundantly clear that an arrest is imminent. He visited yesterday and asked Reginald to surrender his passport. Lady Ashworth set down her cup with deliberate care. My husband is many things, Monsieur Poirot. He can be cold, he can be ruthless in business. He has not always been kind, but he is not a thief, and he is certainly not a murderer. You are certain of this, madame? I am certain that if Reginald wanted those sapphires, he would have bought them. He has the means. He had no need to steal. I interjected gently. Forgive me, Lady Ashworth, but I understand your husband and Mr. Whitfield were engaged in some business dispute. The papers mentioned a lawsuit. A flash of something, anger, fear, crossed her composed features. A minor matter. Whitfield claimed Reginald owed him commission on a private sale. The amount was significant, £20,000, but Reginald considered it extortion. He was contesting the claim through proper legal channels. £20,000, Poirot murmured. This is not perhaps so minor. To a man of my husband's wealth, it is a matter of principle, not poverty. Lady Ashworth leaned forward, her pearls swinging. Monsieur Poirot, I am not naive. I know how this appears. But someone has gone to considerable trouble to make my husband look guilty. The fingerprints, the cigarette case, these things can be explained. Reginald visited Whitfield's office last week to discuss the lawsuit. He smokes constantly. He might have left his case anywhere. And his whereabouts on the night of the murder? Lady Ashworth's composure flickered. He says he was walking, alone, thinking about business matters. She met Poirot's gaze directly. I know how inadequate that sounds, but Reginald often walks at night when he's troubled. He finds it clarifying. Poirot was silent for a long moment. His fingers steepled beneath his chin, and I recognized the posture. The little grey cells were engaging. Tell me about the Dorington Sapphires, Lady Ashworth. Their history, their value. Who knew of their location? They were famous in certain circles. Whitfield had owned them for 15 years, purchased from the estate of the Maharaja of Dorington after his death. He kept them in his private safe, in the study of his townhouse in Belgravia. Only a handful of people knew the combination. And those people were? Whitfield himself, obviously. His wife, Daphne, though I understand they've been estranged for years. She lives in the country now. His business partner, Victor Hale, and his secretary, a young woman named Crane, I believe, Evelyn Crane. I noted the names in my pocketbook while Poirot continued his questioning. The sapphires, they were insured, heavily, for £200,000 according to the newspapers. And who benefits from this insurance, now that Monsieur Whitfield is deceased? I assume his estate, which means his wife, ultimately, unless the will specifies otherwise. Poirot nodded slowly. Lady Ashworth, I will take your case, but I must warn you, I seek only the truth. If that truth implicates your husband, I will not conceal it. I want the truth, Monsieur Poirot. That is all I have ever wanted. She rose, gathering her handbag and gloves. Whatever you discover, it must be better than this. This waiting. This slow strangulation of suspicion. One more question, madame. Your husband, he has enemies? Rivals who might wish to see him destroyed? Lady Ashworth paused at the door. Reginald has built an empire, Monsieur Poirot. In such endeavours, one does not make friends. Victor Hale, Whitfield's partner, lost a considerable sum when Reginald declined to invest in their venture last year. Lord Pemberton has never forgiven Reginald for acquiring the Harrington estate from under him. And there are others, men whose names I don't know, whose grudges I cannot catalogue. I see. One final thing. I shall need access to your husband, to question him myself. Of course, we are hosting a small gathering tomorrow evening, nothing elaborate given the circumstances, but it would seem strange to cancel entirely. The invitation list includes several of the people you'll wish to observe. Shall I add your names? Poirot inclined his head. That would be most helpful. Until tomorrow, Lady Ashworth. When she had gone, I turned to Poirot with some excitement. Well, this is a proper puzzle. The fingerprints, the cigarette case, the missing alibi. It does look rather black for Sir Reginald. Does it, Hastings? Poirot settled into his chair, his expression thoughtful. Or does it look rather too black? The evidence, it is almost theatrical, non? The fingerprints, precisely where they would be most damning. The cigarette case, conveniently discovered. It has the feel of a stage set, carefully arranged for maximum effect. You think someone is framing Sir Reginald? I think that Hercule Poirot does not accept the obvious answer until it has been tested, examined, and proven beyond doubt. The little grey cells, they demand more than circumstance. He rose and moved to the window, gazing out at the grey London morning. Tell me, Hastings, what do you know of Marcus Whitfield? I considered. Only what the papers have reported. Wealthy, well-connected, dealt in precious gems for 30 years. His client list supposedly included royalty, though names were never mentioned. And his death, it was violent, yes? Struck on the head with a bronze paperweight, according to the reports. The safe was open and empty. The servants heard nothing. They sleep in the basement. And the study is on the first floor. The time of death, between 9 and 11, the police surgeon estimated. Whitfield had dined alone that evening. His housekeeper served him at 7:30 and retired at 8. Poirot turned from the window, his moustache twitching. We must visit the scene, Hastings. But first I think we shall call upon Inspector Jameson at Scotland Yard. It would be helpful to understand precisely what evidence he believes he possesses. Do you think he'll cooperate? Inspector Jameson is an ambitious man, but not a foolish one. He knows that Hercule Poirot has been useful to Scotland Yard before. He will cooperate, if only to prove that his case is solid. A small smile played across Poirot's features. And if the case is as solid as he believes, then he has nothing to fear from my involvement. No. I reached for my coat and hat. And if it isn't solid, then, mon ami, we shall have a most interesting investigation ahead of us. A conspiracy involving sapphires, a murdered gem dealer, a financier with no alibi, and he paused, his eyes gleaming with that familiar light of intellectual excitement. And someone clever enough to orchestrate it all. Such a person, Hastings, is always worthy of Hercule Poirot's attention. The officers of Scotland Yard were bustling with the particular energy of a high-profile case. Uniformed constables hurried through corridors, and the atmosphere crackled with urgency. Inspector Jameson, a lean man with a thin moustache and sharp, restless eyes, received us in his cramped office with barely concealed impatience. Monsieur Poirot, Captain Hastings. He did not offer us seats. I assume you're here about the Whitfield murder. Lady Ashworth has engaged your services? She has expressed certain concerns regarding her husband's situation, Poirot said mildly. I'm here to determine whether those concerns are justified. Jameson's jaw tightened. Sir Reginald Ashworth's fingerprints are on the murder victim's safe. His cigarette case was found at the scene. He has no alibi for the time of death, and he had both motive and opportunity. The case is straightforward. And yet you have not arrested him. A man of Sir Reginald's standing requires careful handling, but the arrest will come, Monsieur Poirot. Within the week, I should think. Poirot nodded thoughtfully. The fingerprints on the safe, they were clear, unsmudged, perfectly preserved, right hand, 4 fingers. As if he'd gripped the dial. And the cigarette case, where precisely was it discovered? Under the desk, near the victim's body. Gold, monogrammed R.A., containing 3 Turkish cigarettes. Sir Reginald admitted it was his when we showed it to him. He did not claim it had been stolen, misplaced. He claimed he must have left it during a previous visit. A weak explanation, in my view. Poirot was silent for a moment. The safe. It was open when the body was discovered? Wide open, empty. The sapphires and several other valuable pieces gone. And the paperweight that was used as the murder weapon? Bronze, depicting a leaping tiger. Heavy enough to crack a man's skull. No fingerprints on it, wiped clean, I interjected. That seems odd, doesn't it? If the killer was careful enough to wipe the paperweight, why leave fingerprints on the safe? Jameson's expression flickered with annoyance. Criminals make mistakes, Captain. That's how we catch them. Perhaps Sir Reginald wore gloves for the murder, but removed them to open the safe. Perhaps he panicked and forgot to wipe everything down. Perhaps, Poirot murmured. Inspector, I should like to visit the scene of the crime. Is this possible? The house has been sealed pending further investigation, but I suppose there's no harm in letting you look around. Jameson reached for a ring of keys. I'll have Sergeant Collins accompany you. Don't touch anything. As we left Scotland Yard, Poirot was unusually quiet. I ventured to break the silence. What are you thinking, Poirot? I'm thinking, Hastings, that this case has the appearance of simplicity, but the texture of complexity. The evidence against Sir Reginald is overwhelming, and that, mon ami, is precisely what troubles me. You believe he's being framed? I believe that someone wishes us to believe Sir Reginald is guilty. Whether that someone is the true murderer, or an opportunist exploiting the situation, or even Sir Reginald himself creating an elaborate defence. He spread his hands. That we do not yet know, but we shall discover it. The truth, Hastings, it cannot hide forever from the little grey cells. Chapter 2. The Ashworth Gala. The Ashworth residence on Curzon Street presented a facade of Georgian elegance. White stone, black railings, brass fittings polished to a military gleam. Yet, as Poirot and I ascended the steps the following evening, I fancied I detected something brittle beneath the perfection. The windows blazed with light, but the effect was less festive than defiant, as if the household were determined to project normalcy through sheer force of will. A butler of advanced years and impeccable deportment admitted us to a marble entrance hall, where Lady Ashworth waited to greet her guests. She wore midnight blue silk, a choice that struck me as either unfortunate or deliberately pointed, given the sapphires at the heart of this affair. And her smile, though gracious, did not reach her eyes. Monsieur Poirot, Captain Hastings, thank you for coming. She pressed Poirot's hand briefly. Reginald is in the drawing-room. He knows you're here to help, though I should warn you, he is not receptive to assistance. Pride, you understand. I understand perfectly, madame. A man in Sir Reginald's position must feel his dignity acutely. We passed through to the drawing-room, a long space decorated in shades of cream and gold, where perhaps 20 guests circulated with glasses of champagne. Crystal chandeliers cast prismatic light across silk gowns and starched shirt fronts. Conversation hummed at that particular pitch the English employ when discussing something other than what they're thinking about. I observed the guests with interest. Which among them, I wondered, might be connected to Whitfield's death? There, Poirot murmured, his gaze fixing on a tall silver-haired man standing near the fireplace. Sir Reginald Ashworth, I presume. The financier was perhaps 60, with the commanding presence of a man accustomed to deference. His features were handsome in a severe way, high forehead, aquiline nose, thin lips pressed into a line of controlled displeasure. He held a whisky glass like a weapon, and surveyed his guests with barely concealed impatience. Lady Ashworth guided us through the crowd. "Reginald, darling, Monsieur Hercule Poirot and Captain Hastings." Sir Reginald's pale eyes assessed us with the coolness of a man evaluating an investment. "The detective. Constance tells me you're going to prove my innocence." "I am going to discover the truth, Sir Reginald. Whether that proves your innocence remains to be seen." A flicker of something, respect perhaps, crossed the financier's face. An honest answer. "I appreciate directness, Monsieur Poirot. Ask your questions. I have nothing to hide. Then let us begin with the evening of Mr. Whitfield's death. You say you were walking. Where did you walk?" "Through Mayfair. Down to Green Park. Along Piccadilly." Sir Reginald's jaw tightened. "I walk when I need to think. It's a habit from my youth. My father believed fresh air clarified the mind. And what were you thinking about that particular evening?" "Business. The Whitfield lawsuit. A shipping investment that had gone sour." He drained his whisky. "Nothing that would interest you." "On the contrary, Sir Reginald, everything interests me. The lawsuit. You disputed Mr. Whitfield's claim for commission." "The man was a parasite. I introduced him to a buyer for a particular piece, a ruby pendant, if you must know, and he demanded £20,000 for the privilege. 20,000! When I had done all of the work of finding the customer. And this dispute, it was acrimonious? Business disputes often are, but I didn't kill him over it, if that's what you're implying. I was contesting the claim in court. Why would I murder a man I was about to defeat legally?" Poirot tilted his head. "That, Sir Reginald, is an excellent question. One I shall endeavour to answer." Before Sir Reginald could respond, we were interrupted by the arrival of a new guest, a man of perhaps 45, florid-faced and perspiring slightly despite the November chill. He approached our group with the forced joviality of someone who knows himself unwelcome. "Ashworth, good of you to keep the party going despite— well," he gestured vaguely. "Terrible business about Whitfield, terrible." Sir Reginald's expression frosted. "Hale, I wasn't aware you'd been invited. Constance was kind enough to include me." Victor Hale mopped his brow with a silk handkerchief. "Thought it best to show solidarity, what? Present a united front." I studied Hale with interest. So this was Whitfield's business partner, the man Lady Ashworth had mentioned, who had lost money when Sir Reginald declined to invest in their venture. Poirot, too, was observing him closely. "Monsieur Hale, you were Mr. Whitfield's partner in the gem business, non? For 12 years. Hale's bonhomie slipped momentarily, revealing something rawer beneath. "Built the firm together from nothing. Marcus handled the clients. I managed the finances. A good partnership while it lasted." "While it lasted. You speak as though it had ended before his death." Hale's eyes darted to Sir Reginald, then away. "We'd had some disagreements lately. Business disagreements. Nothing serious." "Nothing serious," Sir Reginald repeated with contempt. "Tell them about the audit, Hale. Tell them what Whitfield discovered last month." The colour drained from Hale's face. "I don't know what you're—" "Whitfield found irregularities in the accounts. Money missing. He was preparing to dissolve the partnership." Sir Reginald smiled coldly. "If anyone had motive to kill Marcus Whitfield, it wasn't me." The tension between the two men crackled like static. Before it could escalate further, Lady Ashworth intervened with practised grace. "Gentlemen, please, this is hardly the time or place." She touched Poirot's arm. "Monsieur Poirot, there are others here you should meet. Let me introduce you to Mrs. Whitfield. She arrived only moments ago." She guided us across the room toward a woman standing alone near the windows. Daphne Whitfield was perhaps 50, with faded blonde hair and the fragile beauty of pressed flowers. She wore black crepe that hung loosely on her thin frame, and her eyes, when she turned to greet us, held the hollow look of someone who has exhausted her capacity for feeling. "Mrs. Whitfield," Lady Ashworth's voice was gentle, "may I present Monsieur Hercule Poirot and Captain Hastings? Monsieur Poirot is looking into the circumstances of Marcus's death." "Another detective." Mrs. Whitfield's voice was flat. "The police have already questioned me twice. I told them everything I know, which is nothing." "You were estranged from your husband, madame?" Poirot asked. "For 7 years. We maintained separate residences, he in London, I in the country. It was easier that way." "May I ask the cause of the estrangement?" Something flickered in those hollow eyes. "You may ask, Monsieur Poirot. But some wounds are too old to examine." She turned back to the window, dismissing us. I touched Poirot's elbow. "She seems genuinely grief-stricken, despite the estrangement." "Grief takes many forms, Hastings, and estrangement does not preclude love, merely the ability to live with it." He scanned the room again. "Ah, there is someone else I wish to observe." He nodded toward a young woman standing near the doorway, half hidden behind a potted palm. She was perhaps 30, plain-featured but neatly dressed in a dark grey suit that marked her as someone outside the glittering social sphere of the other guests. A secretary, I guessed, or a paid companion. "That," Poirot murmured, "is Miss Evelyn Crane, Mr. Whitfield's secretary, one of the 4 people who knew the combination to his safe." We made our way toward her, and I saw her stiffen as we approached. Her hands, clutching a small notebook, tightened visibly. "Miss Crane?" Poirot's voice was gentle. "I'm Hercule Poirot. Might I have a word?" Yes, of course." She glanced around nervously. "I wasn't certain I should come tonight, but Lady Ashworth insisted. She said it would look strange if I didn't, given that I worked for Mr. Whitfield, and he was connected to Sir Reginald through the lawsuit, and—" She trailed off, apparently realizing she was babbling. "You are distressed, mademoiselle. This is understandable. You discovered the body, I believe?" "The housekeeper did, Mrs. Parsons. But I arrived shortly after. I was bringing documents Mr. Whitfield had requested for the next morning, when I saw—" She pressed a hand to her mouth. "I'm sorry, I can't— The blood— There was so much blood." "Peace, mademoiselle. We need not discuss that now." Poirot waited until she had composed herself. "Tell me instead about the safe. You knew the combination?" "Yes. Mr. Whitfield trusted me with it. I often retrieved documents for him, or secured valuables when he was away. And on the night of the murder, you were where?" "At home, in my flat in Bloomsbury, alone." Her chin lifted slightly. "I know that makes me a suspect. I've told the police already. I have no alibi. But you have no motive either, mademoiselle. Don't I?" A bitter smile touched her lips. Mr. Whitfield paid me 30 shillings a week and expected 12 hours of work a day. He criticised my typing, my filing, my handwriting. He made me fetch his lunch and walk his horrible little dog. And when I asked for a raise last month, he laughed. She caught herself, horror dawning. I shouldn't have said that. You'll think, I think nothing yet, mademoiselle. I only observe. A gong sounded, signalling dinner, and the guests began drifting toward the dining room. Miss Crane excused herself hastily, disappearing into the crowd before I could say another word. Curious, Poirot murmured. You think she's involved? I think she is frightened of something, Hastings. Whether that something is guilt or knowledge, or merely the awareness of how she appears to others, that remains to be determined. Dinner was an elaborate affair. 7 courses, each accompanied by appropriate wines, but I found it difficult to concentrate on the food. My attention kept drifting to the guests, watching for tensions, undercurrents, revealing glances. Sir Reginald presided at the head of the table with grim determination, speaking little. Lady Ashworth, at the opposite end, maintained a stream of gracious small talk that must have required heroic effort. Victor Hale drank too much and laughed too loudly at his own jokes. Daphne Whitfield sat in silence, pushing food around her plate. And Miss Crane, seated near the foot of the table, kept her eyes fixed on her plate as if afraid to look at anyone. But it was a moment near the end of the fish course that caught Poirot's attention. Sir Reginald's glass slipped from his fingers, shattering on the table. Wine spread across the white cloth like a bloodstain. Lady Ashworth rose with an exclamation, but before she could summon a servant, Miss Crane was there, napkin in hand, mopping the spill, murmuring reassurances. Please, Sir Reginald. It's nothing, these things happen, let me. Sir Reginald recoiled from her touch. I don't need your help. The words were harsh, disproportionate to the situation. Miss Crane stepped back, as if struck, her face draining of colour. For a moment, something naked flickered in her eyes, hurt, anger, something I couldn't quite name, before she retreated to her seat. Poirot observed this exchange with intense interest, his little grey cells clearly working overtime. After dinner, the gentlemen retired to Sir Reginald's study for port and cigars. It was there, amid leather armchairs and hunting prints, that I witnessed another revealing exchange. Victor Hale cornered Sir Reginald near the drinks cabinet. Their voices were low, but I caught fragments. Can't prove anything, Hale was saying. The accounts are complicated. Anyone might have. Save your excuses for the police. Sir Reginald's voice dripped contempt. Marcus told me everything. The falsified invoices, the shell companies. You've been stealing from the firm for years. Keep your voice down. Hale's eyes darted around the room. Listen, Ashworth, we can help each other. You're in trouble with this murder business. I know things that could... Are you threatening me? I'm offering an arrangement. You forget about the audit, and I'll tell the police I saw you at your club that night. Between 9 and 11, a perfect alibi. Sir Reginald stared at him for a long moment. Then he laughed. A harsh, humourless sound. You'd perjure yourself to save your own skin. How touching. But I don't need false alibis, Hale. I didn't kill Whitfield, and the truth will prove it. He walked away, leaving Hale standing alone, his florid face twisted with something between fear and fury. I reported this conversation to Poirot as we collected our coats to leave. Most illuminating, Hastings. His eyes gleamed. So Victor Hale was embezzling from his own firm. Marcus Whitfield discovered this, and now Whitfield is dead. You think Hale killed him? I think, mon ami, that we have now two people with excellent motives for murder, and neither of them is Sir Reginald Ashworth." He paused on the steps of the Ashworth house, gazing up at the glittering windows. "But there is something else, something I observed tonight that troubles me greatly." "What's that?" "The reaction of Miss Crane when Sir Reginald rejected her assistance. The pain in her eyes, it was not the pain of a servant dismissed by an employer." He turned to me, his expression grave. "It was the pain of a woman whose devotion has been spurned, and such devotion, Hastings, when it curdles into resentment—" He shook his head slowly. "Such devotion can become very dangerous indeed." Chapter 3. Tea and Testimony. The following morning dawned grey and damp, the kind of November day that settles over London like a wet blanket and refuses to lift. Poirot, who detested inclement weather with the same passion he reserved for asymmetrical furniture arrangements, was nevertheless in excellent spirits as we breakfasted. "Today, Hastings, we shall conduct the interviews most delicate. The witnesses who hold the keys to this puzzle, they must be approached with care, with subtlety, with the gentle touch." He buttered his toast with geometric precision. "First we shall visit Mrs. Parsons, the housekeeper who discovered the body. Then, I think, a conversation with Madam Whitfield at greater length, and finally—" He paused, his eyes gleaming. "Finally, we shall call upon Miss Evelyn Crane at her place of residence. You suspect her, then?" "I suspect everyone, mon ami. That is my métier. But Miss Crane, she interests me particularly. There is a connection there, a thread I cannot yet trace. Her reaction to Sir Reginald last evening," he shook his head, "it spoke of history, of intimacy, of something unspoken between them. An affair, you mean? Perhaps. Or perhaps something more complex. We shall see." Our first destination was the Whitfield residence in Belgravia, a handsome townhouse on a quiet square, now draped in the silence of recent death. A constable stood guard at the door, but Sergeant Collins, assigned to accompany us, secured our entry without difficulty. Mrs. Parsons received us in the servants' sitting-room, a cramped but comfortable space below stairs. She was a stout woman of perhaps 60, with iron-grey hair pinned severely back and the red-rimmed eyes of someone who has not slept well in days. "I've told the police everything I know," she said, twisting her apron in her hands. "3 times now. I don't see what more I can add. Forgive the intrusion, madam." Poirot's voice was gentle, soothing. "I ask only for your patience. Sometimes in the retelling, details emerge that seemed unimportant before. You discovered the body, yes?" "At 7 o'clock in the morning. I always bring Mr. Whitfield his tea at 7. He was an early riser, liked to read the papers before breakfast." Her voice trembled. "The study door was closed. I knocked. No answer. I thought perhaps he'd fallen asleep at his desk. He did that sometimes, working late. So I opened the door and—" She broke off, pressing a handkerchief to her mouth. "Take your time, madame. He was on the floor, behind the desk. There was blood, so much blood, and his eyes were open, staring at nothing." She shuddered. I screamed, dropped the tea tray. I don't remember much after that. The footman came running, and then someone telephoned the police. The study door. It was closed, but not locked. That's right. Mr. Whitfield never locked it from inside. Said it made him feel trapped. And the windows? Locked. I checked myself later. The police checked too. All locked from inside. Poirot nodded thoughtfully. The safe, you saw it was open? Yes. Standing wide open. Empty as a church on Monday. That's when I knew it wasn't just an accident. Someone had robbed him. Mrs. Parsons, I want you to think carefully. The evening before, The night Mr. Whitfield died, did anything unusual occur? Any visitors? Any sounds?" The housekeeper frowned, concentrating. "Mr. Whitfield dined alone. I served him at 7:30, roast beef, potatoes, a bottle of claret. He seemed distracted, I remember, kept glancing at the clock. As though expecting someone? Perhaps. I couldn't say for certain. I cleared the dishes at 8:30 and retired to my room in the basement. The other servants, footman and kitchen maid, did the same. We heard nothing after that. Nothing at all, no doorbell, no footsteps. The study is on the first floor, monsieur. The basement is well below. And my hearing isn't what it was." She paused, her brow furrowing. "Although, there was one thing. I'm not sure if it matters." Poirot leaned forward. "Everything matters, madame. Please." Around 10 o'clock, I went up to the kitchen for a glass of water. On my way back down, I thought I heard voices, muffled like, coming from upstairs. Voices? More than one? I thought so at the time, but I told myself I was imagining things. Mr. Whitfield sometimes talked to himself when he was working, and I was tired. I might have been half dreaming. Could you distinguish the voices? Male, female? Mrs. Parsons shook her head helplessly. I couldn't say. It was just sounds, conversation maybe, or argument. I don't know. And you returned to your room without investigating? A flush crept up the housekeeper's neck. Mr. Whitfield didn't like to be disturbed when he was working. He'd made that very clear. And I thought, if he had a late visitor, it was none of my business. Her eyes filled with tears. If I'd gone up, if I'd checked, maybe he'd still be alive. You must not blame yourself, madame. You could not have known. Poirot patted her hand kindly. One more question. Miss Evelyn Crane. She arrived the next morning, yes? After you discovered the body. That's right, about 7:15. She came to bring some documents, she said. When she saw the police, she went white as a sheet. Had Miss Crane visited the house before? In the evenings? Oh, yes, regularly. Mr. Whitfield often had her working late. Dictation, correspondence, that sort of thing. She had her own key. Poirot's eyebrows rose almost imperceptibly. Her own key to the house, to the servants' entrance, at the back. Mr. Whitfield gave it to her years ago, so she could let herself in early, or stay late without disturbing us. I caught Poirot's eye. This was significant. Miss Crane could have entered the house that night without anyone knowing. We thanked Mrs. Parsons for her time and made our way upstairs to examine the study. It was a handsome room, lined with bookshelves and dominated by a massive mahogany desk. The safe, a modern Chubb model, stood in the corner, its door still ajar. Dark stains on the carpet behind the desk marked where Marcus Whitfield had drawn his last breath. Poirot moved through the room with careful attention, touching nothing but observing everything. He examined the safe, the desk, the windows, the fireplace. He stood where the body had lain and gazed around the room from that vantage point. The paperweight, he murmured. It sat here, on the desk. Sergeant Collins nodded. Bronze tiger, about so big. He indicated with his hands. Heavy thing. One blow to the back of the skull. Death would have been almost instantaneous. The killer struck from behind then. Mr. Whitfield was seated at his desk, or had just risen. The police surgeon thought he was standing, facing the safe. The killer came up behind him. So, Mr. Whitfield opens the safe. For himself, or for his killer. He turns his back. The killer strikes. Poirot's fingers drummed against his chin. But why would he turn his back on someone he did not trust? Maybe he did trust them, I suggested. Someone he knew well, someone he had no reason to fear. Précisément, Hastings. Someone familiar, someone expected. He moved to the desk, studying its surface. The cigarette case was found here, beneath the desk. That's right, almost hidden under the edge. As though it had fallen from a pocket, or been placed there deliberately. Poirot knelt, peering at the carpet. Curious. The positioning is too perfect. A falling object would roll, would settle at an angle. This was placed with care. We spent another quarter hour in the study, but Poirot revealed nothing further of his thoughts. His expression, as we departed, was one of deep concentration. Our next call was upon Daphne Whitfield, who had taken temporary residence at Brown's Hotel, rather than return to the Belgravia house. We found her in a private sitting room, dressed again in unrelieved black, a half-empty teacup before her. Monsieur Poirot. Her voice was weary. I wondered when you would come. You expected me, madame. Lady Ashworth mentioned you were investigating. She seemed to think you might clear her husband's name. A ghost of a smile touched her lips. I wish you luck. The evidence against Sir Reginald appears quite damning. And yet you do not seem convinced of his guilt. Mrs. Whitfield set down her teacup with a small click. I am convinced of nothing, Monsieur Poirot. My husband was killed. Whether by Sir Reginald or someone else, it hardly matters to Marcus now, does it? Justice, madame, always matters. Does it? Her eyes, hollow and distant, met his. I wonder. Justice won't bring Marcus back, won't undo 7 years of separation. The estrangement between you, may I ask its cause? For a long moment she said nothing. Then, slowly, Marcus had an affair, a prolonged affair, with a woman young enough to be his daughter. When I discovered it, I gave him a choice. End it, or I would leave. He ended it, or claimed to, but something had broken between us. Trust, perhaps, or simply the illusion that we knew each other at all. The woman, do you know her name? I never wanted to know. I refused to hear it. What good would a name do? She was a symptom, not the disease. The disease was Marcus himself, his restlessness, his need for admiration, his inability to be satisfied with what he had. Poirot leaned forward. Mrs. Whitfield, I must ask, did you benefit from your husband's death? Financially? She laughed, a brittle sound. How direct you are, Monsieur Poirot. Yes, I benefit. The insurance on the Sapphires, £200,000, comes to me as his widow. The house, his investments, everything. She spread her hands. I have more money now than I could spend in 3 lifetimes. But I would trade it all for one honest conversation with the man I married. We never had that, you know. Not once in 30 years. You were in the country on the night of the murder? At my house in Sussex, 20 miles from London, in bed by 9 o'clock. The servants will confirm it. And you have no idea who might have wanted your husband dead? Apart from Sir Reginald? Mrs. Whitfield hesitated. Something flickered across her face. Doubt, perhaps, or reluctant knowledge. There was Victor Hale. Marcus told me, in one of his rare letters, that he'd discovered problems with the accounts. He was going to dissolve the partnership. She paused, and there was the girl. The secretary. Miss Crane? Yes, Miss Crane. The name was spoken with distaste. She worshipped Marcus, you know. Made herself indispensable. Stayed late every night. Anticipated his every need. I always thought it was unhealthy, that level of devotion. You believe she had feelings for your husband? I believe she would have done anything for him. And when such feelings are not returned... She shrugged. People can become very bitter, Monsieur Poirot. Very bitter indeed. Miss Evelyn Crane's lodgings were in a modest boarding house in Bloomsbury, clean and respectable, but a world away from the elegance of Mayfair. She received us in her small sitting-room, her plain face pale and strained. "I knew you would come," she said, "after last night. You were watching me. Everyone was watching me." "You felt observed, mademoiselle?" "How could I not? The secretary with no alibi. The secretary who knew the combination. The secretary who resented her employer." Her hands twisted in her lap. "I've told the police everything. I was here, alone, that night. I have no way to prove it." Poirot studied her with those penetrating eyes. "Miss Crane, I wish to ask you something, and I hope you will answer truthfully. Your reaction last evening, when Sir Reginald spoke harshly to you, it seemed disproportionate, as though there was history between you." The colour drained from her face. "I don't know what you mean." "I think you do. I think there is a connection between you and Sir Reginald that you have not disclosed. And I think," he paused, his voice gentle, "I think that connection may be relevant to this case." For a long moment, she said nothing. Then, slowly, tears began to slip down her cheeks. "It was years ago, before I worked for Mr. Whitfield. I was Sir Reginald's secretary for 3 years. She drew a shuddering breath. "I loved him. God help me, I loved him completely. I believed that he felt the same. But he did not. He was kind to me, attentive. He gave me gifts, took me to dinner. I thought it meant something. But when I spoke of a future together, he laughed, said I had misunderstood, said I was merely an employee, nothing more. And then he dismissed me, gave me a month's wages and a letter of recommendation." Her voice cracked. "The recommendation got me the position with Mr. Whitfield. I suppose I should be grateful." "When was this, mademoiselle?" 8 years ago. I was 22. She wiped her eyes. "I've tried to move on, to build a life, but seeing him last night, standing in his beautiful house with his beautiful wife, all those old feelings came rushing back. The hurt, the humiliation, the anger." Poirot was silent for a moment. "Miss Crane, I must ask you directly. Did you kill Marcus Whitfield?" "No." The word was firm despite her tears. "No, I did not." "Did you kill him to hurt Sir Reginald? To frame him for a crime he did not commit?" She stared at him, horror dawning. "Is that what you think, that I—" She shook her head violently. "I hated what Sir Reginald did to me. I still hate it, but I could never—" She broke down completely, sobbing into her hands. Poirot rose, his expression unreadable. "Thank you, Miss Crane. We will not disturb you further." As we descended the stairs of the boarding house, I turned to him. "Do you believe her?" "I believe, Hastings, that she is telling some part of the truth, but only some part." He paused on the pavement, gazing up at the grey sky. "She was Sir Reginald's secretary. She loved him. He rejected her. And now, 8 years later, she works for a man who was in a bitter dispute with Sir Reginald, a dispute that has resulted in murder and Sir Reginald's implication." "You think that's a coincidence?" "Hercule Poirot," he said quietly, "does not believe in coincidences." Chapter 4. The Gentlemen's Club. The Dorian Club occupied a discreet Georgian building on St. James's Street, its entrance marked only by a brass plaque so small and understated that one might walk past a dozen times without noticing it. This, of course, was entirely intentional. The Dorian catered to gentlemen who valued privacy above all else, men of finance, politics, and inherited wealth who conducted their most delicate business behind its panelled walls. Sir Reginald Ashworth had been a member for 23 years. Poirot had secured an introduction through an acquaintance at the Foreign Office, and we presented ourselves at the porter's desk shortly after noon. The porter, a silver-haired man of military bearing, examined Poirot's card with the scepticism reserved for all outsiders. "Monsieur Poirot, you're expected. Mr. Hartley will see you in the reading room." We were escorted through a succession of hushed chambers, a billiard room where two elderly gentlemen played in silence, a smoking room fragrant with aged tobacco, a library whose leather-bound volumes appeared untouched by human hands. The reading room, when we reached it, was occupied by a single figure, a thin, bespectacled man of perhaps 50, surrounded by newspapers. "Monsieur Poirot." He rose, extending a pale hand. "Edwin Hartley. I'm the club secretary. I understand you're looking into the Whitfield business." "I am, and I am grateful for your cooperation, Monsieur Hartley." "Yes, well." Hartley's lips thinned. "The committee discussed it at some length. Sir Reginald is a valued member, and this affair has been distressing. If there's anything we can do to clear his name, we're prepared to assist, within reason." "I wish only to understand Sir Reginald's movements on the night in question. He claims he was walking, but did he perhaps stop here? For a drink, a meal?" Hartley shook his head. "I've already checked our records. Sir Reginald dined here on the Tuesday before the murder, but not on the Thursday when it occurred. No one on staff recalls seeing him that evening." "And Victor Hale, is he also a member?" "Mr. Hale?" Hartley's expression soured almost imperceptibly. "He was proposed for membership 3 years ago. Sir Reginald, as it happens, was one of his sponsors, but the committee declined to accept him." "On what grounds?" "I'm not at liberty to discuss the committee's deliberations. Suffice it to say that Mr. Hale's reputation in certain financial circles was not entirely spotless." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "You are referring perhaps to irregularities in his business dealings?" Hartley shifted uncomfortably. "I've said more than I should. The club's affairs are confidential." "Of course. But perhaps you could tell me, are there members here who knew Marcus Whitfield, who might have insight into his business, his enemies, his private life?" The secretary considered this. "Lord Blackwood was acquainted with Whitfield. They served on a charity board together. And Mr. Pemberton, he's in the gem trade himself, a competitor of sorts. Both are here today, as it happens. I could arrange introductions if you wish." "That would be most helpful." Lord Blackwood was a florid man of 70, with the constitution of someone who had enjoyed good food and better wine for most of his adult life. We found him ensconced in a leather armchair near the fire, a glass of port at his elbow. "Whitfield, dreadful business, absolutely dreadful." He shook his head, jowls quivering. "Known him for 15 years. Served with him on the board of the Children's Hospital Fund. Reliable sort, always delivered on his pledges." "You knew him well, then?" "Professionally, yes. Socially, less so. Whitfield was a private man, kept his personal life close to the chest." Blackwood sipped his port. "Shame about the marriage, of course. Everyone knew he and Daphne had separated, but one doesn't discuss such things." "Did you know the cause of the separation?" Blackwood's eyes shifted. "Rumours, you know. There are always rumours. Something about a young woman, a secretary or some such. I never paid much attention." "The young woman? Did you ever meet her?" "Good heavens, no. Not the sort of thing one encounters at charity functions." He chuckled, then caught himself. "Sorry, inappropriate, given the circumstances." Poirot leaned forward. "Lord Blackwood, I must ask you directly. Do you believe Sir Reginald Ashworth capable of murder?" The older man was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was measured. "Ashworth is a hard man, ruthless in business. He's crushed competitors, bankrupted rivals, built his empire on the bones of lesser men." He set down his glass. "But murder? For £20,000 and a handful of sapphires?" He shook his head. "No, it doesn't fit. Ashworth destroys men through commerce, not violence. It's not his way." "You believe him innocent, then?" "I believe he's being framed. Someone with a grudge. And God knows he has enemies enough. That business with Hale, for instance. What business is that?" Blackwood glanced around, lowering his voice. Ashworth was going to invest in Whitfield and Hale's firm. Substantial sum, £50,000. Then he withdrew at the last moment. Said he'd discovered irregularities in their accounts. Hale was furious. Claimed Ashworth had deliberately sabotaged the deal to damage his reputation. When was this? 6 months ago, perhaps. Hale's been nursing that grudge ever since. And now Whitfield's dead, and Ashworth stands accused. He raised an eyebrow significantly. Convenient, wouldn't you say? Mr. Pemberton was a different sort entirely. Lean, sharp-featured, with the watchful eyes of a man who missed nothing. He received us in the smoking room, a thin cigar balanced between his fingers. "The sapphires," he said before Poirot could even frame a question. "That's what you want to know about. Everyone does." "You are familiar with the Dorington Sapphires, monsieur?" "Familiar? I tried to buy them twice." Pemberton smiled thinly. "Whitfield outbid me the first time, and the second time he simply refused to sell. Said they were his crown jewels, the centerpiece of his collection. Worth 200,000 on paper, but to a serious collector." He shrugged. "Priceless. And now they have disappeared. Vanished. Along with several other pieces from the safe. A ruby bracelet, some loose diamonds, a pearl choker. All told, perhaps £300,000 worth of merchandise." Poirot's eyebrows rose. "The newspapers mentioned only the sapphires." "The police are keeping the full extent of the theft quiet. Standard procedure. Makes it easier to identify the goods if they surface on the black market." Pemberton drew on his cigar. "But they won't surface. Whoever took those stones knew exactly what they were doing. They'll be recut, reset, scattered across a dozen countries, gone forever." "You speak with authority, monsieur." "I speak from experience. The gem trade has its shadows, Monsieur Poirot. Theft, forgery, fraud. I've seen it all, and I know that a haul like this doesn't simply appear. It requires planning, connections, a buyer already in place." "You believe this was a professional theft?" "I believe the murder was incidental. Whitfield interrupted the thieves, or thief, and paid the price. The real objective was always the stones." Poirot considered this. "And Sir Reginald Ashworth? Does he have the connections to dispose of such merchandise?" Pemberton laughed. "Ashworth? He's a financier, not a fence. He wouldn't know a Kashmir sapphire from a piece of blue glass. No, if you're looking for someone with the knowledge and contacts to orchestrate this—" He paused, something flickering in his eyes. "Look closer to home. What do you mean?" "Whitfield's own firm, Hale in particular. The man's been living beyond his means for years. Everyone in the trade knows it. And he has connections in Amsterdam, Antwerp, the markets where stolen goods find new identities." "You are suggesting Victor Hale arranged the theft?" "I'm suggesting nothing." Pemberton crushed out his cigar. I'm merely observing that means motive and opportunity all point in a particular direction. Whether the police choose to follow that direction," he shrugged, "that's not my concern." We departed the Dorian Club with much to consider. As our taxi crawled through the afternoon traffic, Poirot sat in silence, his fingers steepled beneath his chin. "What are you thinking, Poirot?" "I am thinking, Hastings, that this case has too many threads. The financial motive of Hale, the revenge motive of Miss Crane, the convenient evidence against Sir Reginald, the professional nature of the theft." He shook his head. "They do not all fit together. There are contradictions. Perhaps there were two criminals, the thief and the murderer, working separately. Perhaps, and yet—" He trailed off, gazing out at the grey London streets. "There is something else, something that nags at the little grey cells, a connection I am not yet seeing." "What sort of connection?" "The affair, Hastings. Whitfield's affair with a younger woman. Mrs. Whitfield said she never learned the woman's identity, but someone must know. And I wonder—" He turned to me, his eyes sharp. "Miss Crane was Sir Reginald's secretary 8 years ago. She left under painful circumstances. She then obtained a position with Marcus Whitfield, a man who was, even then, in business dealings with Sir Reginald." "You think Whitfield hired her deliberately? To spite Sir Reginald? Or perhaps Miss Crane sought the position deliberately, to remain close to the circles in which Sir Reginald moved?" He paused. "Tell me, Hastings, if you wish to observe a man who had rejected you, to learn his secrets, to find ways to wound him, what better position than secretary to his business associate?" I considered this. "You're suggesting Miss Crane has been planning this for 8 years. I am suggesting that resentment, nursed over many years, can grow into something monstrous. And I am suggesting that we do not yet know the full extent of Miss Crane's involvement in these events. The taxi deposited us at Whitehaven Mansions, where a surprise awaited. Mrs. Pearson met us at the door, her expression troubled. 'A gentleman to see you, Mr. Poirot. He's been waiting nearly an hour. Wouldn't give his name, but he seemed agitated.' We found our visitor pacing the sitting room. Victor Hale, his florid face slick with perspiration, his hands trembling. 'Monsieur Poirot, thank God!' He grasped Poirot's hand with desperate intensity. 'I need your help. The police, they've been to my office. They've found the accounts, the discrepancies. They're going to arrest me.' 'For embezzlement, Monsieur Hale?' 'For murder.' His voice cracked. 'They think I killed Marcus. They think I stole the sapphires to cover my debts. But I didn't. I swear to you, I didn't. I'm a thief, yes. I admit it. I've been skimming from the firm for years. But I would never. Calm yourself, Monsieur.' Poirot guided him to a chair. 'Tell me everything, from the beginning.' Hale drew a shuddering breath. 'It started 5 years ago. Small amounts at first. A few hundred here, 1,000 there. Marcus never noticed. He was always more interested in the gems than the books. But then I got careless. Greedy. I started taking more. How much in total? £40,000. Perhaps more.' He buried his face in his hands. 'When Marcus discovered it last month, I thought my life was over. He was going to dissolve the partnership, prosecute me, destroy everything I'd built. And so you killed him?' 'No!' Hale looked up, his eyes wild. 'I was going to pay it back. I had a plan, a buyer in Amsterdam, a private deal. I just needed time. I was going to explain, to negotiate.' 'Where were you on the night of the murder, Monsieur Hale?' The question hung in the air. Hale's face crumpled. I was outside Whitfield's house, in Belgravia. I went there to talk to him, to plead for more time.' His voice dropped to a whisper. "But when I arrived, I saw someone leaving, through the servants' entrance, at the back, a woman." Poirot went very still. "A woman? You are certain?" "I couldn't see her face. It was dark and she was wearing a hat, a coat, but it was definitely a woman. Moving quickly, furtively. She disappeared into the mews before I could get a proper look." "What time was this?" 10:30, perhaps 11:15. "And you did not enter the house?" "I lost my nerve. Seeing that woman, I thought perhaps Marcus had company, a visitor. I decided to come back the next morning." His laugh was bitter. "By then, of course, he was dead." Poirot studied him with those penetrating eyes. "Why did you not tell this to the police?" "Because they would ask what I was doing there. And I would have to admit," he gestured helplessly, "the embezzlement. My presence at the scene, it makes me look guilty." "And yet you are telling me." "Because I'm desperate, Monsieur Poirot. I'm a thief, yes, but I'm not a killer. And that woman, whoever she was, she knows the truth. She was there. She may have seen the murderer. She may be the murderer." Poirot was silent for a long moment. Then, slowly, he nodded. "Very well, Monsieur Hale. I will look into this matter. But I warn you, if I discover that you are lying, that you have concealed anything from me, I will personally ensure that justice is served. Do you understand?" "I understand." Hale rose, some colour returning to his cheeks. "Thank you, Monsieur Poirot. Thank you." When he had gone, I turned to Poirot. "Do you believe him?" "I believe he saw a woman leaving Whitfield's house that night. Beyond that," he spread his hands, "the little grey cells require more data. The woman, it must have been Miss Crane. She had a key to the servants' entrance." "So she did." Poirot moved to the window, gazing out at the darkening sky. "But there is another possibility, Hastings. One we have not yet considered." "What's that?" "The affair. Whitfield's affair with a younger woman." He turned to face me, his expression grave. "What if that woman was not Miss Crane, but someone else entirely? Someone who has remained hidden until now? Someone who had reason to visit Whitfield that night? And reason to silence him forever?" Chapter 5. Shadows and Ledgers. The morning brought fog, thick yellow-grey, pressing against the windows of our flat like something alive. Poirot, nursing his tisane, regarded it with distaste. "This English weather, Hastings, it is an assault upon the senses. How does one think clearly when the very air conspires to obscure?" "I rather like fog," I admitted. "There's something romantic about it." "Romance," he sniffed. "Give me the clarity of the Belgian sun. One can see one's enemies approaching." Despite his complaints, Poirot was in a state of suppressed excitement. The little grey cells, I could tell, were working overtime. He had spent the previous evening making telephone calls and sending telegrams, and now, as we finished breakfast, he outlined our programme for the day. First, we visit the offices of Whitfield and Hale. The financial records, Hastings, they are the key. Somewhere in those ledgers lies the truth of this conspiracy. You think the theft was an inside job? I think that £300,000 of gems do not vanish without considerable planning. And I think that whoever planned this theft also planned the murder, whether they committed it themselves or not. You're suggesting there might be multiple conspirators? I am suggesting that we must follow the money, mon ami. It is the oldest principle of detection. Cui bono, who benefits? And in this case, the benefits are substantial indeed. The offices of Whitfield and Hale occupied the second floor of a respectable building in Hatton Garden, London's Diamond District. The fog had lifted slightly by the time we arrived, but a persistent drizzle had taken its place, darkening the already sombre streets. A young clerk admitted us to a reception area where dust motes drifted in the grey light. The firm, it seemed, had suspended operations pending the resolution of Mr. Whitfield's affairs. Inspector Jameson telephoned ahead, the clerk explained nervously. Said I was to give you full access to the records. Mr. Hale's instructions as well. He's most anxious to cooperate. I am certain he is, Poirot murmured. The ledgers, if you please. All financial records for the past 5 years. The clerk led us to a small office crammed with filing cabinets and produced stack after stack of leather-bound account books. Poirot settled himself at the desk, adjusted his pince-nez, and began to examine them with the concentration of a surgeon. I confess that financial records hold little fascination for me. After an hour of watching Poirot trace columns of figures with his fingertip, I found myself growing restless. Is there anything useful, Poirot? Much that is useful, Hastings, much indeed. He did not look up. The embezzlement, it is here, plain as day. Small amounts at first, then larger. Hale was clever. He disguised the thefts as business expenses, commissions, shipping costs, but the pattern is unmistakable. So he was telling the truth about that at least. About the theft, yes, but there is something else. Poirot's finger stopped on a particular entry. Here, a payment of £5,000, 18 months ago. The notation says consultant fees, but there is no corresponding invoice, no record of who received this payment. Could be another theft? The account is different. This payment was authorized by Mr. Whitfield himself, not Hale. And there are others. Regular payments, £500 each month, to a numbered account at a private bank in Switzerland. I leaned over his shoulder. Blackmail? Perhaps, or payment to a mistress. His eyes gleamed. Someone was receiving substantial sums from Marcus Whitfield, and that someone had considerable influence over him. Poirot continued his examination, making notes in his small leather notebook. I wandered the office, examining the framed certificates on the walls, the photographs of Whitfield shaking hands with various dignitaries. One photograph caught my attention. Whitfield at some sort of charity gala, surrounded by well-dressed guests. Poirot! Look at this! He rose and joined me before the photograph. Ah, the Children's Hospital Fund, I believe. Lord Blackwood mentioned that Whitfield served on the board. Yes, but look who else is in the picture. I pointed to a figure at the edge of the group, a young woman in an elegant gown, her face turned slightly toward Whitfield with an expression of unmistakable adoration. Mon Dieu, Poirot breathed. Miss Evelyn Crane. She's wearing diamonds, expensive ones by the look of it. How does a secretary afford diamonds like that? Poirot studied the photograph intently. She cannot, not on 30 shillings a week, unless... He trailed off, his expression sharpening, unless they were a gift. From Whitfield? The affair, Hastings, the younger woman. Mrs. Whitfield said she never learned her identity, but what if... He stopped, his eyes widening. What if the affair was not ended as Whitfield claimed? What if it continued in secret all these years? You think Miss Crane was Whitfield's mistress? I think it explains much. Her devotion to him, her bitterness when he treated her poorly, the monthly payments to Switzerland. He returned to the ledgers, flipping pages rapidly. Yes, here it is. The payments began 8 years ago, the same time Miss Crane joined the firm. I felt a chill despite the stuffiness of the office. 8 years, the same time she left Sir Reginald's employ. Précisément. She was rejected by Sir Reginald Ashworth, humiliated, dismissed, and then, almost immediately, she becomes secretary to Marquis Whitfield, his confidant, his mistress. Poirot's voice was soft, almost wondering. She did not merely survive the rejection, Hastings. She prospered. She found a new protector, a new source of affection. But why would she kill him, if he was supporting her? That is the question, is it not? Poirot closed the ledger with a snap. We must find the answer, and I believe I know where to look. Our next destination was the private bank where the Swiss account had been established. It took some persuasion and an urgent telephone call to Inspector Jameson, but eventually we were admitted to the manager's office, a hushed sanctuary of mahogany and brass. The account was opened 8 years ago, the manager confirmed reluctantly. Monthly deposits of £500 transferred from the accounts of Whitfield and Hale. The beneficiary is listed only by number. We do not keep names on file for such accounts. But there must be some means of identification. Correspondence, perhaps. The manager hesitated. There were occasional withdrawals, made in person at our Geneva branch. The signature on file is, he consulted his records, E. Crane. Poirot sat back, satisfaction evident on his features. And the current balance of the account? £47,000. I let out a low whistle. 8 years of payments, carefully accumulated. A small fortune by any measure. One more question, monsieur. The withdrawals. When was the last one made? The manager checked his records. 3 weeks ago, £5,000 withdrawn in cash from the Geneva branch. 3 weeks ago, Poirot repeated thoughtfully. Just before the murder. The fog had returned with a vengeance by the time we emerged from the bank. Poirot walked in silence, his umbrella tapping against the wet pavement, his expression unreadable. It seems clear enough to me, I ventured. Miss Crane was Whitfield's mistress. He paid her for years, keeping her in comfort, buying her silence about their affair. But something changed. Perhaps she demanded more. Perhaps she threatened to tell Mrs. Whitfield, and so she killed him. A plausible theory, Hastings, and yet, there are contradictions. If Miss Crane wished to continue receiving payments, why kill the source of those payments? Whitfield dead benefits her nothing. The payments will cease, the affair will be exposed, and she becomes a suspect in his murder. Perhaps she didn't think it through. Crimes of passion rarely involve careful planning. Ah, but this crime was carefully planned. The theft of the sapphires, the framing of Sir Reginald, the convenient evidence left at the scene. Poirot shook his head. This was not passion, Hastings. This was calculation. Cold, deliberate calculation. Then who? That is what we must determine. And I believe— He stopped suddenly, his eyes fixed on something across the street. Hastings, look there! I followed his gaze. Through the shifting fog, I could make out a figure standing beneath an awning. A woman in a dark coat and hat, watching us. Miss Crane? No, the silhouette is wrong, taller, thinner. Poirot stepped forward, and the figure immediately turned, disappearing into the fog. Quick, Hastings! We pursued, but the fog was too thick, the streets too crowded. Within moments, our quarry had vanished. Damnation, I muttered. Who was that? Someone who does not wish to be seen. Someone who is watching our investigation with considerable interest. Poirot's jaw tightened. We are getting close, Hastings. Close enough to make someone nervous. We returned to Whitehaven Mansions to find another telegram waiting, this one from Inspector Jameson. Crane woman fled lodgings stop. Landlady says left last night with suitcase. Stop warrant issued. Stop advise if cited stop. Jameson Poirot read the telegram twice, then set it down with a curious expression. She has run. The evidence mounts against her, and she has fled. Doesn't that prove her guilt? It proves her fear. Guilt and fear are not always the same thing. He moved to the window, gazing out at the fog-shrouded city. But I confess, Hastings, that the case against Miss Crane is now overwhelming. The affair, the payments, the key to the servant's entrance, the woman Hale saw leaving the house, her flight. Then it's over. Almost. He turned to face me, and I saw in his eyes that peculiar light of intellectual excitement. But there is one thing that troubles me still, one detail that does not fit. What's that? The cigarette case. Sir Reginald's cigarette case, found beneath Whitfield's desk. He began to pace. If Miss Crane killed Whitfield, if she stole the sapphires and framed Sir Reginald, how did she obtain his cigarette case? Sir Reginald says he left it during a previous visit to Whitfield's office, but Miss Crane was Whitfield's secretary. She would have found it, returned it. Perhaps she kept it deliberately, saving it for the right moment. For 8 years? No, Hastings. The case was left recently. The Turkish cigarettes inside were fresh, not stale. He stopped pacing. His expression intent. Someone else placed that case at the scene. Someone with access to Sir Reginald himself. Who would have... I stopped, realization dawning. The Ashworth household. A servant, perhaps? Or someone closer still. Poirot's voice dropped. Lady Ashworth. She came to us seeking help for her husband. But what if that was merely a pretense? What if she wished to observe our investigation from within? Lady Ashworth. But she has no motive, does she not? Her husband is cold, she told us, ruthless, not always kind. His eyes narrowed. What if she knows more than she has revealed? What if she is not the loyal wife she appears to be? Before I could respond, there was a knock at the door. Mrs. Pearson entered, looking flustered. Begging your pardon, Mr. Poirot, but there's a lady to see you, says it's urgent. Says it's about the murder. Who is it? She wouldn't give her name, but she's in quite a state, crying, shaking like a leaf. Poirot and I exchanged glances. Show her in. The woman who entered was not Miss Crane, nor Lady Ashworth. She was Daphne Whitfield, and she looked as though she had not slept in days. Monsieur Poirot. Her voice was hoarse. I must tell you something. Something I should have told you from the beginning. Please, madame, sit, tell me everything. She sank into a chair, her hands trembling. The affair, Marcus's affair. I said I never learned the woman's identity. That was a lie. Poirot leaned forward. You know who she was? Yes. Mrs. Whitfield's eyes filled with tears. It was Evelyn Crane. I've known for years, but that's not why I'm here. Then why, madame? She drew a shuddering breath. Because there was someone else. Someone Marcus was even more afraid of. Someone who had been threatening him for months. Threatening him? With what? Exposure, ruin, the destruction of everything he'd built. Her voice cracked. Marcus was involved in something illegal. Smuggling, I think. Diamonds, sapphires, gems from India and Africa. Brought in without proper documentation. Sold to collectors who didn't ask questions. I felt my breath catch. This was new. Something far darker than a simple affair. And who was threatening to expose this? Poirot asked. Mrs. Whitfield looked up at him, her face a mask of anguish. Victor Hale, his own partner. Hale discovered the smuggling and demanded a share. A much larger share than Marcus was willing to give. They argued constantly. Marcus was terrified. She buried her face in her hands. He told me, the week before he died, that Hale had threatened to kill him if he didn't pay. I thought it was an exaggeration. I never imagined—" She broke down completely, sobbing into her gloves. Poirot sat in silence for a long moment. Then, softly, "Thank you, madame. This information is most valuable." When she had composed herself and departed, I turned to Poirot. "Well, does this change things?" "It changes everything, Hastings." His eyes were grave. "We have been looking at this case from the wrong angle entirely. The affair, the frame, the sapphires, they are pieces of a larger puzzle. And at the centre of that puzzle is not Miss Crane, not Sir Reginald, but Victor Hale. Hale killed Whitfield? Perhaps. Or perhaps—" He stopped, his expression shifting. "Or perhaps Hale is also a pawn, a convenient scapegoat, like Sir Reginald. Someone has orchestrated this conspiracy with masterful precision, and I begin to see, at last, who that someone might be." "Who?" Poirot smiled, a thin, dangerous smile. "Tomorrow, Hastings, we shall gather all the players together, and the truth will finally emerge." Chapter 6. The vigil. The following evening found us once again at the Ashworth residence on Curzon Street. But the atmosphere was markedly different from our previous visit. Gone was the brittle gaiety of the gala. In its place hung a tension so palpable it seemed to press against the walls. Poirot had arranged the gathering with his customary theatrical flair. Invitations had been dispatched that morning, each one carefully worded to ensure attendance. The recipients, I noted, had all complied, drawn, perhaps by curiosity, or by fear of what their absence might suggest. Lady Ashworth met us in the entrance hall, her composure showing cracks for the first time since our acquaintance. "Monsieur Poirot, everyone is assembled as you requested, but I must tell you, Reginald is furious. He doesn't understand why you've gathered these people in our home." "Sir Reginald will understand soon enough, madame. I ask only for his patience and yours." She led us to the drawing-room, where the guests waited in uncomfortable silence. Sir Reginald stood by the fireplace, whisky in hand, his expression thunderous. Victor Hale occupied a chair near the window, mopping his brow despite the chill. Daphne Whitfield sat alone on a settee, her black dress stark against the cream upholstery. And in the corner, half hidden by shadow, sat a figure I had not expected to see. "Miss Crane," I murmured to Poirot. "I thought she had fled." She had, but my telegram reached her before she could board the boat train at Dover. I assured her that flight would only confirm her guilt, and that if she were innocent, she had nothing to fear from this gathering. Miss Crane looked up as we entered, her face pale and drawn. Dark circles ringed her eyes, and her hands clutched a handkerchief so tightly that her knuckles had gone white. "Monsieur Poirot." Sir Reginald's voice was sharp. "Perhaps you'll explain why you've assembled this menagerie in my home. I have cooperated with your investigation, but my patience has limits, and those limits shall not be tested much longer, Sir Reginald. I have asked you all here tonight because the murder of Marcus Whitfield has remained unsolved for too long. The police have their theories that point in various directions." His gaze swept the room. "But Hercule Poirot does not deal in theories. He deals in truth." "Then get on with it," Hale snapped. "Some of us have better things to do than sit about waiting for parlour tricks." "Patience, Monsieur Hale. The truth requires careful handling." Poirot moved to the centre of the room, positioning himself before the fireplace. "Let us begin with the facts as we know them. Marcus Whitfield was killed in his study on the night of November the 14th. He was struck from behind with a bronze paperweight. His safe was opened, and jewels valued at £300,000 were stolen. The police found fingerprints belonging to Sir Reginald Ashworth on the safe and Sir Reginald's cigarette case beneath the desk. Evidence I've already explained, Sir Reginald interrupted. I visited Whitfield's office the previous week. I must have left my fingerprints then. And the cigarette case, indeed. You have explained these things. But explanations, Sir Reginald, are not always the same as truth. Poirot held up a hand to forestall further interruption. Let me continue. The evidence against you was compelling, too compelling perhaps. It had, as I observed from the beginning, a theatrical quality, as though it had been arranged for maximum effect. You're saying someone framed me? I am saying that someone wished the police to believe you were guilty. But who? And why? He turned to Victor Hale. Monsieur Hale, you had excellent motive to kill your partner. He had discovered your embezzlement. £40,000 stolen over 5 years. He was preparing to dissolve the partnership and prosecute you. Your ruin was imminent. Hale's florid face went pale. I've already told you, I didn't kill him. I was outside the house that night, yes, but I never went in. I saw a woman leaving. Yes, the woman. We shall return to her. Poirot's gaze shifted to Daphne Whitfield. Madame Whitfield, you stood to inherit a considerable fortune upon your husband's death. £200,000 in insurance alone, plus the house, the investments, the remaining inventory. A powerful motive, especially for a woman who had endured years of humiliation at her husband's hands. Mrs. Whitfield's eyes flashed. I was in Sussex. The servants will confirm, your servants confirm that you retired to your room at 9 o'clock and did not emerge until morning. But Sussex is only 20 miles from London. A motor car could make the journey in under an hour. You could have left after the servants retired, driven to London, committed the murder, and returned before dawn. This is outrageous. It is hypothesis, madame. Nothing more, for now. Poirot turned next to Miss Crane, who shrank back in her chair. And then there is you, mademoiselle, the secretary with no alibi. The woman who knew the combination to the safe. The woman who possessed a key to the servant's entrance. I didn't, her voice cracked. I didn't kill him. No, but you were his mistress, were you not? For 8 years you received monthly payments, £500, deposited in a Swiss account. You wore diamonds he gave you. You attended functions on his arm while his wife languished in the country. The room went silent. Sir Reginald's whisky glass stopped halfway to his lips. Lady Ashworth's hand flew to her throat. I loved him, Miss Crane whispered. I know how that sounds, but I loved him. He was going to leave his wife. He promised, yes, the promises of a faithless man. Poirot's voice softened slightly. And when those promises proved hollow, when you realized he would never leave his wife, never make you respectable, what then, mademoiselle? I would never have hurt him. Never. And yet you fled. When the police began to suspect you, you packed a suitcase and ran for Dover. Because I knew how it looked. The affair, the money, the key. I knew they would think. She broke down, sobbing into her handkerchief. Poirot let the silence stretch. Then quietly, you are right to be afraid, mademoiselle. The evidence against you is substantial. But there is one detail that does not fit. One piece of the puzzle that refuses to align. He reached into his pocket and produced a gold cigarette case. Sir Reginald stiffened. That's mine. Indeed, your cigarette case, found beneath Marcus Whitfield's desk on the morning his body was discovered. Poirot turned the case over in his hands. The police assumed you had dropped it during the murder. You claimed you had left it during a previous visit. But I asked myself, if you left this case in Whitfield's office a week before the murder, why was it not found? Why was it not returned to you? I don't know. Perhaps it fell behind the desk, or perhaps it was not there at all. Perhaps it was placed at the scene deliberately, on the night of the murder, by someone who wished to implicate you. Sir Reginald's eyes narrowed. Who would have access to my cigarette case? An excellent question. Poirot's gaze swept the room once more, and came to rest on Lady Ashworth. She went very still. Monsieur Poirot. Her voice was steady, but I caught the slight tremor beneath. Surely you're not suggesting— I am suggesting nothing, madame. I'm merely observing that you had access to your husband's possessions. You could have taken the cigarette case at any time. Why on earth would I frame my own husband for murder? That is indeed the question. Why would a wife wish to see her husband accused of a crime he did not commit? Poirot's voice dropped. Unless, perhaps, she wished to be rid of him. Unless she had found another, someone who offered the affection, the attention that Sir Reginald did not provide. Lady Ashworth's composure cracked. That's absurd. I came to you for help. I hired you to prove Reginald's innocence. And what better way to appear innocent yourself than to engage the famous Hercule Poirot? What better way to monitor the investigation, to stay one step ahead? He shook his head slowly. It was a clever strategy, madame, but not clever enough. Constance? Sir Reginald's voice was hoarse. What is he talking about? I don't know. He's mad. Lady Ashworth rose, her hands clenched at her sides. I won't listen to any more of this. Then you will not wish to hear what I discovered this afternoon. Poirot's voice hardened. I made inquiries, madame, discreet inquiries, about your movements on the night of the murder. You told your husband you were attending a charity function, but the function ended at 9 o'clock. You did not return home until after midnight. The colour drained from her face. I stopped to visit a friend. Which friend? I don't see why. Which friend, madame? The silence stretched. Lady Ashworth's eyes darted around the room, to her husband, to the door, to the windows, like a trapped animal seeking escape. Constance? Sir Reginald's voice was ice. Answer him. When she spoke, her voice was barely audible. Marcus. I was with Marcus. The room erupted. Sir Reginald surged forward. Hale let out a strangled oath. Mrs. Whitfield gasped aloud. Only Miss Crane remained silent, her tear-stained face frozen in shock. You were having an affair with Whitfield? Sir Reginald's voice shook with fury. My wife! With that man! It wasn't like that! Lady Ashworth's composure shattered completely. We were friends, old friends from before I married you. He was kind to me, Reginald. Kind, something you've never been, had not in 20 years of marriage. So you killed him. Sir Reginald advanced on her. You killed him and tried to make it look like No! She backed away, her eyes wild. No, I didn't kill him. I swear to you, I didn't. When I left him that night, he was alive. Alive! What time did you leave? Poirot's voice cut through the chaos. 10:15, perhaps 20 past. I wasn't watching the clock. And you left by which exit? The servants' entrance. Marcus showed me. There's a key hidden beneath a loose flagstone. He used it for visitors. He didn't want the servants to see. Poirot nodded slowly. So, we have 2 women who visited Marcus Whitfield that night. 2 women who left by the servants' entrance. 2 women who had reason to wish him ill. or to wish Sir Reginald Ashworth implicated in his death. He turned to Miss Crane. "Mademoiselle, you also visited the house that night, did you not?" Her sobs had subsided. When she looked up, her expression had changed, hardened somehow. The softness of grief replaced by something colder. "Yes, I went there around 11 o'clock. And what did you find?" "The study door was open. Marcus was—" She swallowed hard. "He was already dead, lying on the floor. The safe was open, empty. I panicked. I ran." "You did not think to call the police? And tell them what? That I was his mistress? That I had a key to his house? That I had found his body in the middle of the night?" Her laugh was bitter. "I knew how it would look. So I fled, and I've been running ever since." Poirot studied her for a long moment. "You saw no one? Heard nothing?" "Nothing. The house was silent. Whoever killed him was already gone." "And the sapphires? The jewels from the safe?" "Gone when I arrived. I never saw them." Poirot turned away, pacing before the fireplace. The room watched him in tense silence. The wronged husband, the weeping widow, the bitter mistress, the desperate embezzler, the adulterous wife. Each with secrets, each with motives, each with lies. "We have, then, a timeline," Poirot said at last. Lady Ashworth visited Whitfield and left at approximately 10:15. Miss Crane arrived at approximately 11 and found the body. The housekeeper heard voices at 10 o'clock. Monsieur Hale observed a woman leaving at 10:30. "That must have been Lady Ashworth," Hale said eagerly. "She's admitted she was there. Perhaps. Or perhaps there was a third visitor. Someone who arrived after Lady Ashworth departed, but before Miss Crane arrived." Poirot's eyes gleamed. Someone who had the combination to the safe. Someone who had reason to kill Marcus Whitfield. Someone who wished to see both Sir Reginald and Miss Crane destroyed. He stopped pacing. His gaze settled on a single figure. Not Lady Ashworth, not Miss Crane, but someone who had sat in silence throughout, her black dress blending with the shadows. "Madam Whitfield, your alibi in Sussex, it was confirmed by your servants, but servants can be bribed. And 20 miles is not so very far." Daphne Whitfield rose slowly, her face a mask of cold fury. "How dare you? I loved my husband. You despised him. He humiliated you for years with his affairs. First Miss Crane, then Lady Ashworth, perhaps others you never knew about. And all the while you waited for the right moment, the right opportunity. This is absurd." "Is it? You knew about the smuggling. You knew that Hale was blackmailing Marcus. You knew that the business was about to collapse, and with it, your hopes of a comfortable widowhood." Poirot's voice dropped. "Unless, of course, Marcus died before the scandal broke. Unless the insurance paid out before the truth emerged. I was in Sussex. You were clever, madame, very clever. You knew about the servant's entrance, the hidden key. You knew that Miss Crane had access and motive. You knew that Sir Reginald's cigarette case could be obtained through Lady Ashworth." His eyes narrowed. "You orchestrated everything, the theft, the murder, the frame, all of it." For a moment, I thought she would deny it. Her face contorted with rage, her hands clenched at her sides. Then, slowly, something shifted in her expression. The fury faded, replaced by something colder. Something almost amused. "You cannot prove any of this." "Can I not?" Poirot smiled. That thin, dangerous smile I had seen before. "We shall see, madame. We shall see." Chapter 7. The Revelation. The drawing room had fallen silent. Every eye was fixed on Daphne Whitfield, who stood before us with the rigid composure of a woman carved from ice. Her challenge hung in the air. You cannot prove any of this. And for a moment, I feared she might be right. But Poirot merely smiled. Proof, madame? You wish for proof? He reached into his breast pocket and withdrew a folded document. Then let us examine the evidence together. Let us trace the threads of this conspiracy to their source. He unfolded the paper with deliberate slowness. This is a record of travel, obtained this afternoon from the railway station at Haywards Heath, the nearest station to your Sussex residence. On the night of November the 14th, a woman matching your description purchased a return ticket to Victoria Station. The train departed at 8:45 and arrived in London at 9:32. Mrs. Whitfield's composure flickered. That proves nothing. Many women travel by train. Indeed, but the ticket clerk remembers you particularly. You were, he said, a lady in deep mourning, very agitated, very insistent that the train be on time. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Curious behaviour for a woman who claims she was peacefully asleep in Sussex. He's mistaken, or lying, perhaps. Then let us consider the physical evidence. Poirot produced a second item from his pocket, a small glass vial. This was found in your husband's study, tucked behind the books on a high shelf. The police overlooked it in their initial search. They were focused on the more obvious evidence, but Hercule Poirot, he overlooks nothing. What is it? Chloral hydrate, a sedative commonly used to induce sleep, or to render a victim unconscious before administering a fatal blow. He held the vial up to the light. The label bears the name of a pharmacy in Lewes. A pharmacy, I discovered, where you have an account. The colour drained from Mrs. Whitfield's face. Marcus had trouble sleeping. The sedative was for him, prescribed by his doctor. His doctor in London prescribed barbiturates, not chloral hydrate. I have confirmed this. Poirot set the vial on the mantelpiece. You brought this from Sussex, madame. You brought it with the intention of using it. This is circumstantial, all of it. Then let us move to something more concrete. Poirot's voice hardened. The sapphires, £300,000 worth of gems, vanished without a trace. The police have been searching pawnshops, dealers, black markets across Europe. Nothing. It is as though the stones evaporated into air. Because the thief was clever enough to... Because the stones never left England. Poirot cut her off. They are hidden, madam. Hidden somewhere safe. Somewhere no one would think to look. And I believe I know where. For the first time, genuine fear flickered in Mrs. Whitfield's eyes. Your Sussex residence. The house you shared with your husband before the estrangement. A house you have occupied alone for 7 years. A house with gardens, outbuildings, a wine cellar. Poirot stepped closer. I took the liberty of contacting the Sussex Constabulary this afternoon. They conducted a search with the cooperation of your household staff. You had no right. I had every right. A man is dead, madame. Justice demands answers. His voice dropped to barely a whisper. They found the sapphires in your wine cellar, wrapped in velvet, hidden behind a false panel. All 7 stones, plus the ruby bracelet, the loose diamonds, the pearl choker. Everything that was taken from your husband's safe. The silence that followed was absolute. I watched Mrs. Whitfield's face transform. The mask of composure crumbling. The cold fury giving way to something raw. Desperation, perhaps. Or the bitter recognition of defeat. You planted them! Her voice was hoarse. Someone planted them there to frame me. Who, madame? Who would have access to your cellar? Who would know about the false panel? A panel, I am told, that your husband installed years ago for storing his more questionable acquisitions. She had no answer. Her hands trembled at her sides. "But let us set aside the sapphires for a moment," Poirot continued. "Let us speak of motive. You told us, madame, that you knew of your husband's affair with Miss Crane. You claimed ignorance, then admitted the truth. But there was more, was there not? More that you did not reveal. I don't know what you mean. The smuggling. Your husband's illegal trade in unregistered gems. You knew about this. You told us so yourself. But what you did not tell us is that you were complicit." Mrs. Whitfield's eyes widened. "That's a lie, is it? I have examined the financial records of Whitfield and Hale, the shell companies, the numbered accounts, the falsified invoices. Many of them trace back to a single source, a company called Meridian Holdings, registered in your maiden name." Poirot's voice was relentless. "You were not merely aware of the smuggling, madame. You were a partner in it." She faltered, her composure shattering completely. "Marcus made me. He said it was necessary, that we would lose everything if I didn't help. And when Victor Hale discovered the truth and began to blackmail your husband, when the entire enterprise threatened to collapse." Poirot shook his head slowly. "You saw the end approaching. The scandal would destroy you, your reputation, your social standing, your comfortable life. Unless, of course, Marcus died before the truth emerged. Unless the insurance paid out while you were still the grieving widow, above suspicion. No, that's not. You planned it carefully. You knew about Miss Crane's key to the servants' entrance. You knew about Lady Ashworth's affair with your husband. Perhaps you had known for some time, watching, waiting, gathering information that might prove useful." Poirot began to pace, his voice rising. "You knew that Sir Reginald Ashworth was in a bitter dispute with Marcus, that his fingerprints were already on the safe from a previous visit. All you needed was something more, something to seal his guilt." "The cigarette case," I murmured. "Précisément, Hastings, the cigarette case." Poirot turned to Lady Ashworth, who sat frozen in her chair. "You, madam, you were the unwitting instrument. During one of your visits to Marcus Whitfield, you brought your husband's cigarette case. Perhaps you meant to return it. Perhaps you had taken it deliberately, to torment Sir Reginald with its absence. Either way, it ended up in Whitfield's possession." Lady Ashworth's face was ashen. I don't remember. I may have left it there. I was careless with things, always losing. You left it. And Madame Whitfield knew." Poirot turned back to Daphne. "You knew that Lady Ashworth was visiting your husband. You knew about the cigarette case. And on the night of the murder, you retrieved it and placed it beneath the desk. Evidence that would point directly at Sir Reginald. You can't prove that. Can I not?" Poirot reached into his pocket once more. "This letter was found among your husband's papers. It is addressed to you, written in his hand, dated 3 days before his death." He unfolded the letter and began to read aloud. "Daphne, I know what you are planning. Constance told me about the questions you've been asking, the interest you've taken in our affairs. If anything happens to me, this letter will serve as evidence of your guilt. I have arranged for it to be delivered to the police in the event of my death. Do not think you can escape justice. Iam." The room went still. Mrs. Whitfield stared at the letter as though it were a serpent poised to strike. "Your husband suspected you," Poirot said softly. "He knew you were plotting against him. He wrote this letter as insurance, but he underestimated your thoroughness. You searched his papers after the murder. You destroyed what you could find. But this letter was hidden elsewhere. in a safety deposit box at his bank, with instructions to be opened only in the event of his death. That letter could be a forgery. Anyone could have. The handwriting has been verified by 3 separate experts. It is indisputably Marcus Whitfield's hand. Poirot's voice hardened. The game is finished, madame. You killed your husband. You stole the sapphires. You framed Sir Reginald Ashworth and allowed suspicion to fall on Miss Crane and Lady Ashworth. You orchestrated everything, and now you will answer for it. For a long moment, Daphne Whitfield said nothing. She stood motionless, her face a mask of conflicting emotions, rage, despair, and something that might have been relief. Then, slowly, she began to laugh. It was not the laugh of madness, but something colder. The bitter amusement of a player who has lost a long and difficult game. You're right, of course. Her voice was steady now, almost conversational. About all of it. I killed Marcus. I took the sapphires. I planted the evidence against Sir Reginald. Sir Reginald let out a strangled sound. Lady Ashworth pressed her hand to her mouth. Miss Crane simply stared, her tear-stained face blank with shock. Why? Hale demanded. Why go to all this trouble? Why not just divorce him? Mrs. Whitfield's smile was razor-thin. And walk away with nothing? After 30 years of humiliation? After watching him parade his mistresses through the society while I rotted in Sussex? She shook her head. No, I wanted everything. The money, the insurance, the satisfaction of watching him die. And the frame? Poirot asked. Why Sir Reginald? Because he was convenient. Because his fingerprints were already on the safe. Because Constance, she turned to Lady Ashworth with a look of pure venom. Because Constance had given me the means. The cigarette case. The perfect piece of evidence. You knew about her affair with Marcus? I knew everything. Marcus was careless with his correspondence. Love letters. Assignation notes. He kept them all. The sentimental fool. I read them. I catalogued them. I waited for the right moment to use them. Lady Ashworth made a small, wounded sound. Sir Reginald did not look at her. The night of the murder, Poirot said. Tell us what happened. Mrs. Whitfield's expression grew distant, as though she were watching a scene unfold from very far away. I took the train from Sussex, as you surmised. I arrived at Victoria just before 10 o'clock and took a taxi to Belgravia. I knew Constance was with Marcus that evening. I had intercepted a note arranging the rendezvous. I waited in the mews behind the house until I saw her leave. At 10:15, approximately, she was flustered, rushing, didn't even look around. A contemptuous smile flickered across her face, careless, as always. And then I used the hidden key, the one beneath the flagstone. Marcus had shown me, years ago, when things were different. Her voice faltered briefly, then steadied. I let myself in through the servants' entrance. The house was quiet. I climbed to the study. And Marcus? He was at his desk, going through papers. He looked up when I entered, surprised at first, then frightened. He knew, you see. He had begun to suspect. The letter he wrote. Yes. He confronted me about it. Asked what I was planning. I told him I was simply concerned for his safety, that I had heard rumours about Hale's threats. He didn't believe me. We argued. And then Mrs. Whitfield's eyes grew cold. I had the chloral hydrate in my pocket. I suggested we have a drink together, for old times' sake. He was suspicious, but I persuaded him. Poured 2 glasses of whiskey. Added the sedative to his. He drank it. He trusted me enough for that, at least. Old habits. She smiled bitterly. The chloral worked quickly. Within minutes, he was drowsy, confused. I helped him to his feet, led him to the safe, made him open it, told him I needed to check on a piece of jewellery he was holding for me. A ruse, naturally. When the safe was open, I took the sapphires. The other pieces as well, anything of value. I wrapped them in my coat and set them aside. And then you killed him. He was barely conscious, standing with his back to me, leaning on the safe for support. Her voice was flat, emotionless. I picked up the paperweight, the bronze tiger. It was a gift from one of his Indian clients, and I struck him. Once, he fell without a sound. The room was utterly silent. Even Poirot seemed momentarily affected by the cold precision of her account. "The cigarette case?" he prompted. "I placed it beneath the desk. I had taken it from Constance's handbag weeks earlier. She had been carrying it about, perhaps meaning to return it to Reginald, perhaps keeping it as some sort of trophy. I knew it would be found. I knew it would point to him. And then you left, through the servants' entrance, locked it behind me, replaced the key, took a taxi to Victoria and caught the last train to Sussex. I was in bed by 1 o'clock, and the servants none the wiser." "A perfect crime," Poirot said quietly. "Or so you believed. I might have succeeded if you hadn't interfered." For the first time, anger crept into her voice. "The police were ready to arrest Reginald. The case was closed. And then Constance, fool that she is, engaged you. You attempted to monitor the investigation. I provided information, pointed you toward Hale, toward Evelyn Crane, anyone but myself. 'The woman in the fog,' I said suddenly. 'Outside the bank, that was you. Watching, waiting, trying to determine how close you were getting.' She laughed shortly. 'Too close, as it turned out.' Poirot nodded slowly. 'You underestimated 2 things, madam. The thoroughness of Hercule Poirot and your husband's foresight. The letter he wrote was his final revenge. Even in death, he ensured that you would face justice. Justice!' She spat the word. 'What justice was there for me? 30 years of marriage to a man who betrayed me, humiliated me, flaunted his conquests before all of society. I gave him everything, my youth, my beauty, my prospects, and he repaid me with contempt. And so you killed him. And so I killed him.' She drew herself up, a strange dignity settling over her features. 'I would do it again. He deserved everything he got.' Poirot turned to me. 'Hastings, please telephone Inspector Jameson. Tell him that the murder of Marcus Whitfield has been solved.' I moved toward the telephone, but Mrs. Whitfield's voice stopped me. 'Wait.' She reached into her handbag, and before anyone could react, she produced a small pistol. The room erupted in chaos, Sir Reginald shouting, Lady Ashworth screaming, Hale diving behind a chair. But Poirot did not move. He stood perfectly still, his eyes fixed on Mrs. Whitfield's face. 'You will not shoot, madame, won't I?' Her hand trembled, but the gun remained level. 'I have nothing left to lose. You have your dignity, your pride.' Poirot's voice was gentle, almost kind. 'You have shown yourself to be a woman of considerable intelligence and determination. Do not destroy that now with a final act of violence. What difference does it make? I'll hang either way, perhaps, but there is a difference between a woman who killed for vengeance and a woman who kills in desperation. One commands a certain respect, the other is merely pitiful.' The words hung in the air. Mrs. Whitfield's hand wavered. 'Give me the gun, madame. It is over.' For a long moment she hesitated. Then, slowly, she lowered the weapon. Poirot stepped forward and took it from her unresisting hand. 'Inspector Jameson will be here shortly,' he said. 'Until then, I suggest we all remain calm.' The police arrived within the hour. Mrs. de Whitfield was taken into custody without further incident, her composure restored, her face a mask of cold resignation. She did not speak again, except to request that her solicitor be notified. The rest of us remained in the drawing-room, shaken by the evening's revelations. Sir Reginald stood alone by the window, his back to his wife. Lady Ashworth wept quietly in her chair. Miss Crane had ceased crying and sat in stunned silence, as though unable to process all that had occurred. Victor Hale approached Poirot hesitantly. "The embezzlement! Will you tell the police?" "That is not my decision, monsieur. But I suspect the authorities will be more concerned with murder than with financial irregularities for the moment." Poirot's gaze was stern. "You would be wise, however, to make restitution. And to consider a more honest line of work." Hale nodded, chastened, and retreated. Inspector Jameson found me by the fireplace, nursing a much-needed whisky. "Extraordinary work, Monsieur Poirot," he said grudgingly. "I'll admit, I had my doubts when Lady Ashworth engaged you, but you've delivered the genuine article. The truth, Inspector, is always the genuine article." Poirot adjusted his cuffs, though I confess this case presented certain complexities. "Complexities?" Jameson snorted. "3 women in love with the same man, all of them with access to his house, all of them with motives. It's a wonder you sorted it out at all." "The little grey cells, Inspector. They do not fail, Hercule Poirot." Chapter 8. Justice Served. 3 weeks had passed since that tumultuous evening at the Ashworth residence. London had moved on. As London always does, new scandals, new sensations, new headlines to capture the fickle attention of the public. But for those of us who had been touched by the Whitfield affair, the ripples continued to spread. I found Poirot in his sitting room on a grey December afternoon, arranging his collection of newspaper clippings with characteristic precision. The fire crackled cheerfully in the grate, and the aroma of fresh coffee filled the air. "Ah, Hastings!" He looked up as I entered. "You have seen the papers, I presume?" "The verdict, yes." I settled into my customary chair. "Guilty, as expected." The judge was rather harsh in his remarks. Madame Whitfield showed no remorse. The jury, they do not forgive such coldness. Poirot set aside his scissors. "She will hang, I think, unless the Home Secretary intervenes." "Do you think he will?" "Non." Poirot shook his head slowly. "There is no public sympathy for a woman who kills her husband for money and then attempts to frame an innocent man. The newspapers have been thorough in their condemnation." I thought of Daphne Whitfield as I had last seen her, composed, defiant, utterly without regret. There had been something almost admirable in her refusal to beg for mercy. "Almost. And the others, have you heard anything?" "I have made inquiries." Poirot reached for his coffee cup. "Sir Reginald and Lady Ashworth have separated. She has retreated to the country, a small cottage in Devon, I believe. He remains in London, attending to his business affairs. Their marriage is finished then." "It was finished long before, Hastings. The revelations merely made public what had been private misery for many years." He sighed. "It is a tragedy in its way. 2 people bound together by duty and convention, neither capable of giving the other what they truly needed. Do you think Sir Reginald will forgive her? Eventually. Forgive the affair? Perhaps. Time softens many wounds." Poirot's expression grew thoughtful. "But forgive the humiliation of public exposure? The knowledge that all of London knows his wife cuckolded him with a gem dealer? That, mon ami, is a harder thing." I nodded, understanding. Pride was a powerful force, and Sir Reginald Ashworth had more than his share. "What about Victor Hale?" Monsieur Hale has made full restitution to the Whitfield estate. Every penny of the £40,000 he embezzled, plus interest. A faint smile crossed Poirot's features. He has also resigned from the gem trade entirely. I'm told he is now managing a small hotel in Brighton. A considerable come-down, but an honest living. That is something, at least. Poirot set down his cup. He was fortunate, Hastings. The police were so focused on the murder that they showed little interest in prosecuting his financial crimes. A quiet settlement was reached. And Miss Crane? Poirot was silent for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was softer. Miss Evelyn Crane has left England. She sailed for America last week, New York, I believe. A fresh start, far from the scandal and the memories. She's running away. She's seeking a place where no one knows her past, where she is not the mistress or the secretary or the woman who loved unwisely. Poirot shook his head. I do not blame her, Hastings. She has suffered enough. I thought of Miss Crane, her tear-stained face, her trembling hands, the raw anguish in her voice as she confessed her love for a man who had never deserved it. 8 years of devotion, repaid with crumbs and broken promises. She was innocent of murder, I said. But she wasn't innocent, was she? Not entirely. Who among us is entirely innocent, Hastings? Poirot's eyes met mine. She loved a married man. She accepted his money, his gifts, his lies. She hoped for a future that was never possible. He spread his hands. These are moral failings, perhaps, but they are human failings, and they do not deserve the punishment of death. Unlike Daphne Whitfield, unlike Madame Whitfield, whose failings were not human weakness, but calculated malice. She did not kill in a moment of passion or desperation. She planned, she schemed, she executed. And when her crime was discovered, she showed not a flicker of regret, only anger that she had been caught. You said something to her at the end, about dignity and pride, about the difference between vengeance and desperation. I spoke to the woman she might have been, Hastings, the woman who, in another life, might have channeled her intelligence and determination towards something other than destruction. Poirot's expression grew distant, but that woman never existed, I think. The bitterness had corroded her too deeply. There was nothing left but the desire for revenge. We sat in silence for a moment, the fire crackling between us. The sapphires, I said at last. What happened to them? Returned to the Whitfield estate and sold at auction. The proceeds went to settle Marcus Whitfield's debts, and there were many. Poirot smiled faintly. The famous Dorington Sapphires are now in the collection of an American industrialist. They will grace the neck of his wife at parties in Newport and Palm Beach, far from the blood that once stained them. A fitting end, an ending at least. Whether it is fitting? He shrugged. That is a question for philosophers, not detectives. I rose to leave, but paused at the door. Poirot, there's something I've been wondering. We? When did you know? When did you first suspect Daphne Whitfield? Poirot considered the question. From the beginning, Hastings, something troubled me about her. The grieving widow, estranged but heartbroken. The woman who knew of her husband's affair, but claimed ignorance. The convenient alibi in Sussex. He tapped his temple. The little grey cells, they whispered that something was not right. But you didn't accuse her until the end. Because suspicion is not proof, mon ami. I needed evidence. The railway ticket, the sedative, the sapphires in her cellar, the letter from her husband. Without these things, my suspicions were merely suspicions. And if you hadn't found the evidence? If she had covered her tracks more thoroughly? Poirot's eyes gleamed with that familiar light of intellectual certainty. Then I would have searched harder, Hastings. The truth, it does not hide forever. Every crime leaves traces, physical, psychological, emotional. The perfect murder, it does not exist. There is always a thread, a contradiction, a moment of carelessness. He smiled, and Hercule Poirot, he is very patient. He waits, he watches, and eventually the truth reveals itself. I nodded, satisfied. At the door, I turned back one final time. Do you ever feel sorry for them, Poirot? The murderers, I mean, after everything is over. He was quiet for a long moment. I feel sorry for the waste, Hastings. The waste of intelligence, of passion, of life itself. Daphne Whitfield could have been many things. A businesswoman, a philanthropist, a force for good in the world. Instead, she chose destruction. He sighed deeply. That is the true tragedy of murder, mon ami. Not only the life that is taken, but the life that is thrown away. I left him there, silhouetted against the fire, his little grey cells no doubt already turning to the next puzzle, the next mystery, the next glimpse into the darkness of the human heart. Outside, the December fog had lifted. Pale winter sunlight filtered through the clouds, casting long shadows across the London streets. Somewhere in the city, life went on. Marriages and betrayals, fortunes made and lost, secrets kept and revealed. And somewhere, in a small flat in Whitehaven Mansions, Hercule Poirot waited for the next summons. Justice, after all, was never finished. Thank you for joining us at Agatha Christie Tales for the Sapphire Conspiracy. We hope you enjoyed this journey into the shadowed world of high society, where glittering facades conceal the darkest of secrets. If this tale pleased you, do leave your thoughts in the comments below. Your words illuminate our path through these mysteries. Until next time, dear listeners, remember, the truth may hide, but it cannot hide forever. Not from the little grey cells. Bonne nuit, the end.